observers as the party agents, all of them, with the exception of the APNU AFC party agents.
At 10:27 p.m. that night, did you see, well, 10:27 p.m., did you see the CEO Myers?
Yes, I did.
And what, if anything, did she say?
Ms. Myers came into the tabulation room where everyone was seated, they were waiting, and she instructed everyone to leave the building because they were going to lock it.
Did people comply with the instructions?
They did not, because earlier there was word given to everyone in the room that permission was granted for 2 persons per party to remain in the tabulation room where the SOPs were, and that was out of concern for the safety of the SOPs. So at first they weren't allowing that, and I believe that the parties made some intervention, and Mr. Lowenfield did grant that permission for at least 2 persons to be from each party to remain.
Well, had permission been given for observers to remain?
I'm not aware if anything specifically was said about observers, but the observers remain nonetheless.
And apart from your observer group, can you recall now which other observer groups remained?
We had, there were observers from the Private Sector Commission, GCCI, and there were also observers from the OAS, from the CARICOM observant team, from the Commonwealth, and the EU. Carter Center also was present.
Sure. And when you all did not comply with the instructions, can you tell me what happened?
Eventually, the observers started to fight out bit by bit. So they were among some of the first, and that was out of concern for safety. Word had circulated that it was no longer safe to be in the building.
Sure, pause. At any point, did you see members of the riot squad come into the building?
Yes.
You were still in the tabulation room at that time?
I was out of it by that time. By the time we were just out when the riot squad entered into the building.
And when they entered, about how far away were they from you?
We were just evacuated from the building with our security team, and at the same time they entered inside of it. So we were out on the outside, they just moved into the building.
And you said you have a video of this?
That is correct.
And you said that this was the last time you saw the SOPs?
That is correct.
Now, in your statement, you tell us that there had been legal proceedings initiated and so on. All right? I want us to move on a bit from that. Do you recall the 11th of March, 2020?
Yes, I do.
Did you go to Ashman's building on that day?
No, the 11th was when the judgment was given by the Chief Justice. And we were told that we had to be back at Ashman's building on the 12th of March.
Okay, so listen carefully to my question. Sorry, oh dear, okay, sorry.
I just wanted to ask you, between 6th of March to 11th of March, the tabulation process came to a halt?
That is correct. Nothing happened.
Thanks.
Okay, so I just asked you, if you recall, if you had gone to Ashman's building on the 12th of March, 2020.
Correct, yes.
And why did you go there?
This is in keeping with the Chief Justice ruling, which was handed down on the 11th of March, that the tabulation process is to resume at 11 a.m. on the 12th. And so observers proceeded, myself included, to the Ashman's building to observe the process again.
When you went to Ashman's building, were you allowed entry?
No. Myself and my colleague proceeded to access the Ashman building from the northern side, which was near the Parliament building. And there were barricades erected there, and we were prevented by the police from entering further.
You spoke about someone called Colin April.
That is correct.
As far as you know, who was Mr. April?
Mr. April worked as a security officer at the GCOM, with GCOM.
How do you know that?
We asked, and he identified himself as a security officer for GCOM.
How was he dressed?
He was just very casually. There was nothing that indicated that he was an employee of GCOM.
And was when when you saw Mr. Colin April, where was he in relation to Ashman's building?
So after we could not access Ashman's building on the northern side, we took another route and entered from the eastern side, which is the Hatfield Street entrance. And that was where we met Mr. April at the barricade section there of the building.
And apart from what you have just told us, did he say anything else to you?
Yes, he said that forthwith that it will be one observer and one permission and one political party agent per party that will be allowed into the building, and the parties were to select that one agent. Observer missions were to select their one observer to enter into the building, and a new accreditation for observers will be given.
Did he say how or when that accreditation would be given?
No, he did not identify the process by which any new accreditation for observers were to be given.
Were you the person representing AmCham?
Correct. I was the one that was selected by AmCham.
And did you clear police security?
Yes, I did.
When you cleared police security, did you enter Ashman's?
Yes, when I cleared the security, there was another layer of security at the entrance of the Ashman building. I entered it and was pretty much outside of the tabulation center, but right within the building.
So is it that this was a different room that you went to?
I went from where we were before we accessed the room. It was the same room, but rearranged very differently. The entire building of Ashman was completely deserted. And because the tabulation room was enclosed by glass, you can actually see inside of it. It was no longer the same room that we'd left. Everything was rearranged. Furniture were now limited. There were just chairs, no table except for one head table.
And did you see the returning officer?
Yes, I did. That morning, Ms. Domingo did show up.
And did you see the DCU?
Yes, Ms. Myers was there.
Apart from these two persons, did you see any other GCOM employees?
There were a few of the junior level employees that would subsequently assist Ms. Domingo in the tabulation. Two of them that I can name are Ms. February and Ms. Denise Bab Cummins.
Did the returning officer speak to the persons there?
Yes, he did. He came to everyone and wrote their names down, and then he proceeded to say that we will enter into the room where the tabulation process will resume. We also, myself and party agents also asked him questions such as if someone is tired, if they were allowed to interchange with another person, because they only wanted one person per party, an observer there.
And what did he say?
With respect to that, he said he thinks that can be facilitated.
Where was Ms. Myers when this conversation was taking place?
She was not anywhere in that location.
So having told you that the tabulation process was going to commence, did you go anywhere?
No, I stayed there until we were ushered into the tabulation room for the commencement of the tabulation process.
And where was this?
This was through the glass compartment where previously we were for the tabulation.
I want you to look, I'm asking that you look at page 14 and in particular paragraphs 69 to 72, please. Now, did you see at that point in time when the tabulation was about to commence, did you see the SOPs or any SOPs in the possession of the returning officer or any of GCOM's employees?
No, there was no SOP present in the room.
Did Mr. Mingo say what he would be using on behalf of his office to conduct the verification process?
Yes, he did. Upon taking the receipts when we entered the room, he proceeded to explain what he will do, and he said that he will be reading from a broadsheet. This was prior to him reading sections of the Representation of the People's Act to explain the process, and then proceeded to bring out a broadsheet from which he's going to read.
And you have a video and a recording of what occurred?
That is correct.
Was any GCOM commissioner present at the time?
Ms. Bibi Shadiq, the deceased commissioner for GCOM, was present in the room at that time.
And did she say anything?
Yes, she raised objection to what Mr. Mingo was about to do, that is to use the broadsheet, and told him that it was not in compliance with the Chief Justice ruling.
Did you respond?
Yes, he did. He told her that she should not interrupt him.
And did he say where these numbers on the broadsheet had come from?
Yes, we did inquire how did Mr. Mingo arrive at the numbers that he claimed that he would be using from the broadsheet, and he was very agitated, but nevertheless explained that he took the original SOPs that were given to him and tabulated those numbers and came up with the broadsheet which he was going to use. He entered them in the computer, he says, and tabulated them and came up with the broadsheet.
He said he entered them?
Sorry?
Did he say he entered them?
He said it was entered into a computer. My apologies. It was entered into the computer.
And at the time was an observer for the European Union there?
Yes, the observer was there.
Did the ANUG agent ask Mr. Mingo how that party could verify the numbers in Mr. Mingo's SOPs?
That is correct. There were a lot of back and forth between observers, party agents, and Mr. Mingo on the process. The EU observer was asking him to further explain the process that he was really about to undertake in the tabulation, because it was, again, a deviation from what was stipulated.
Sure. Okay. So the EU observer asked about what would be done if there were variances.
That is correct.
And did the EU observer ask about whether there would be access to the SOPs used by the RO for his tabulation?
That is correct, yes.
Did he reply? Did the RO reply?
No, he did not reply.
Did you see Ms. Sonia Parag of the PPPC there?
Yes, she was present.
And did she ask Mr. Mingo anything?
Correct. And if I may just backpedal a little bit, and her question came as a result, it was a follow-up on what Mr. Jonathan Yearwood from ANOG had asked him,
Yes.
which was how do we know that the numbers that he inputted into the computer and tabulated to produce the broadsheet was accurate. And that was when Ms. Parag also followed up with a question to ask how will we know that it's accurate, and Mr. Mingo replied, then you can follow from your SOP.
Did she ask him what would happen if the numbers didn't match?
That is correct.
And what was his reply?
He replied that there are other recourses in law that she can adhere to.
Did she ask him whether there was to be verification from the SOPs?
Yes, she did. She asked him, will we be using SOPs versus SOPs in the tabulation process?
And what was his response?
It was no.
Now, at some point, ma'am, the RO agreed to use SOPs, correct?
That is correct.
Having agreed, did he do anything?
He instructed one of his, the GCOM staff that was with him to go and bring those SOPs.
And did the person return with the SOPs?
She did not return with the SOPs.
At 12:10, did you see the chairman of GCOM?
Yes, I did.
Was she accompanied by anyone?
She was accompanied by 2 of her bodyguards.
How did you know they were bodyguards?
They were attired in a way that indicated some level of security. They were walking in a very peculiar manner, and they were behind her, and whenever she stopped, they were right behind her and standing at an alert and attention. Did
the chairman speak to the people in the room?
Yes, she did, and the parties and the observers in the room expressed their concerns about what Mr. Mingo was about to do, which is to read from a broadsheet and not the SOPs.
And did the chairman then say she needed to see the written judgment of the Chief Justice.
That is correct. After the parties brought it to her attention that Mr. Mingo was deviating from the ruling of the Chief Justice, she said she wanted to read the written judgment of the Chief Justice to be guided on the way forward.
At 2 p.m. that day, did Mr. Mingo say anything to those of you gathered there?
Correct. When the chairman for GCOM indicated that she wanted to read the written judgment, it was Mr. Kit Nascimento, an observer from the Private Sector Commission, that asked for the process to be halted until the chairman would have read the written judgment and give her guidance forward. So we waited in that room until 2 p.m. when Mr. Mingo arrived again to state that the process was suspended for the day.
So between 9 and 2, did any verification take place at all?
None took place at all.
Did you return to Ashman's building on the 13th of March 2020?
Yes, I did.
Were you eventually allowed inside?
Again, not for first. We were, I was told I could not access the building as yet, and it was much later when I was able to access the building.
Did anyone escort you into the building?
Yes, myself and others were under heavy police escort.
What do you mean by that?
So there were several police officers, all armed, and they were walking around us to take us to the back entrance of the Ashman building. It wasn't the main entrance as we used before.
Was anyone threatening you as you entered the building?
No.
So you entered the building, and where did you go?
I entered in the building through a door that was on the southern side of the building, which was a door that really led to the parking lot. But when I entered that room, I saw that we were literally in the GCOM Media Center. And that was where the tabulation process would resume.
And apart from yourself, from AmCham, were there other observers there?
Yes, there were observers from the EU, Carter Center, the OAS, CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and there were local observers, again, one each from each of these missions. And there were local observers from the Guyana Bar Association, the Private Sector Commission, AmCham, and I think there was a GGCCI is present as well.
And in this room that you were escorted to, can you tell us what facilities you had as observers to do your work?
The observers were, and the party agents were on chairs. That was the only thing that was made available to us. There was no table where we can rest either document, papers, or laptop. It was just some uncomfortable chairs, but there was a head table that the GCOM staff used.
And were party agents in that room?
Yes, they were.
Were they there with their statements of pose?
The PPP particularly had 2 suitcases of SOPs.
Did you see GCOM staff there?
Yes, I did.
Can you recall who they were?
Yes, apart from Mr. Mingo, Ms. Myers was there, and some of the staff that I saw and I knew by name because we'd seen them earlier or the day before was Ms. February, Ms. Duncan, Ms. Dennis Babb Cummins. There was a male that was inputting the statistics in the computer. Unfortunately, I do not know his name. There was Mr. Colin April, who was a security officer, and there were several other GCOM staff whose identity I do not know.
So did the RO, now that you all were about to commence the process, did the RO give any indication about any number that he was going to start with?
Mr. Mingo indicated that the tabulation process was going to resume from where it left off. That was a point of contention because nobody can say definitively which point it was left off. Therefore, they asked Mr. Mingo to provide the running totals so that they can follow to ensure that they're on the same page before any such tabulation process can resume.
Did he agree?
He did not agree, nor could he produce any totals to show a continuation.
So did the process well, I don't know if to use the term start or recommence.
At that point, no. There were lots of heated arguments between Mr. Mingo and the party agents over what should be the point of start for this tabulation process that we were there for.
Did Mr. Mingo eventually agree to restart?
Yes, he did. As a matter of fact, Mr. Mingo was the one who initiated that idea. The way they were trying to get him to just know where they were going to start, he was the one that says that I'll restart it from 400, box 4001.
And that was the first box, correct?
That was the first box for the East Bank Demerara.
So when Mr. Mingo made this announcement, what, if anything, occurred?
At that point, the APNU AFC had a party agent in that room by the name of Miss Carol Joseph, and she became extremely loud and intimidated and started to shout and berate persons in the room and to literally direct Mr. Mingo that he should not listen to any party agents or observer, and he needs to continue the tabulation from where he left off, and he is not to start the process over again.
Well, was Mr. Mingo able to say from where he had left off?
No, he was not able to say where he left off.
So after receiving these directions from the party agent, what was the reaction of the returning officer?
At that point, Mr. Mingo got very agitated because when he had engaged the parties earlier, despite the heated arguments, he was still relatively calm and was relatively calm when he announced the restart of the process from box 4001. But after the intervention of Ms. Carol Joseph, Mr. Mingo became very agitated and almost angry, and then shouted that he will not restart the process and he will continue the tabulation.
So, you're telling us about someone named Miss Carol Joseph. We don't, who is this person?
Ms. Carol Joseph was the party agent for the APNAFC that was selected to be in the room. That was the one party agent for that particular party.
So, we have a situation where the returning officer, Mr. Mingo, agreed to begin from box 4001.
That is correct.
And then within minutes after the intervention of this person named Joseph, he became agitated and yelled,
He's going to restart, he's going to resume it from some point, but not. He recanted his position of starting over.
Let's see.
After the RO took the decision to go along with the directions of Ms. Joseph, did anyone speak? I should ask you this. Did you see any GCOM commissioner there at that time?
Yes, there was Mr. Robertson Ben, and he attempted to explain to Mr. Mingo that what he was about to do is in contravention of the ruling of the Chief Justice. There were a lot of exchanges between himself and Mr. Mingo.
What did Mr. Mingo say to Commissioner Ben?
He told him not to interrupt him. And further, actually appealed for the police to put Mr. Ben out.
Did they put Mr. Ben out?
They attempted to, but he didn't.
One for the police, you said?
Mr. Mingo.
To eject the GCOM commission?
Correct. He was also supported by a gentleman whose name I don't know, that was also shouting at party agents and observers that they were talking too much and that they need to behave themselves. And they also appealed to the police to come in and quiet the place and to put anybody out that was making any noise, including Mr. Colin April.
Did the police actually come into the room?
Yes, one police did come into the room, and that police officer eventually stood between the head table and the party, where the party agents were, to make sure that nobody got closer to them.
I want to go back a bit. You told us that you all had entered the building under heavy police escort.
Correct.
So what became of those police officers after you all went to this other room where the verification was due to either start or restart?
They were outside of the building.
After this exchange with the GCOM commissioner, and I take it there were other exchanges,
Yes, they were.
what did the RO do?
So he proceeded to direct the GCOM staff to start calling from the SOP. Sorry, the documents they had in front of them. And they proceeded to call out votes allocated to various
Reading on
parties.
this spreadsheet.
We could not verify if it was a spreadsheet or SOP, but there were documents in front of them. We weren't allowed to examine them.
Now, you described the SOPs as being, you made a gesture at the beginning of your testimony, indicating that they were thick.
Correct, and very big.
Yes, so did they appear to you to be SOPs?
From where I was sitting, their paper, you can see sheets of paper, they were of a bigger size, but exactly what they were, we could not say. I could not say. I wasn't allowed to examine it, although there were appeals to examine those documents.
And when you say the GCOM staff members started to call out figures, are these the same people who you identified by name just a few minutes ago?
That is correct.
Did the diplomats remain in the room?
The diplomats from the four countries, the ABCE countries, were present, and then they eventually left after Ms. Joseph insulted them, and they saw that the process again was it lacked transparency and was not in keeping with the Chief Justice ruling.
When you say ABCE,
That would be the U.S. ambassador was present, the British High Commissioner was present, the Canadian High Commissioner was present, and the head of the EU delegation was present.
and they were insulted by Ms. Joseph?
That is correct.
Who said what?
So Ms. Joseph said that they were meddlers and they should not be here in Guyana doing anything that they were doing, and they should leave the country.
Right, so did
These
it,
were-
sorry,
These were people at ambassadorial or high
Yes.
commissioner level.
Such as Ambassador Sarah Ann Lynch,
Yes,
High
you
Commissioner.
told us, and Ms. Joseph was telling them that they should leave the country,
Yes. And they were meddlers.
that they were
They were meddlers.
meddlers.
Yes.
well, this was a process under the authority of the returning officer. Did the returning officer say anything to these diplomats when these insults and threats and so on were made?
He did not say anything.
Did he say anything to Ms. Joseph?
He did not. He just kept saying her, tell her to calm down and sit. That's the only thing he said.
Calm down,
And sit.
sit.
And sit.
I'm tempted to sit myself. Did she calm down and sit?
No.
And the GCOM staff, did they start calling out numbers?
Yes.
Describe the process very quickly for me, if you can.
So whatever the document was that was in front of them, and I could not verify that, neither could my colleagues, observers. What was observed was that they were calling these numbers per party very rapidly. When I timed it, it was 3 to 4 SOPs being completed in 1 minute or less.
And were you as an observer, having been engaged in the process of taking down the numbers before, were you able to get the numbers down that were now being called at this pace?
I was able to get most of the numbers down because I had to devise strategies of how to actively listen, block out the noise that I was hearing, because there was lots of chaos taking place. Ms. Joseph was shouting, the GCOM staff was racing ahead with numbers. Party agents were telling her, GCOM, that they were doing this in contravention of the Chief Justice ruling. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I had to drown those out, listen carefully, enter and type in as much as I can, with specific focus on the APNU, AFC, and the PPP's number in particular.
Was there another GCOM commissioner there?
Yes, that was Mr. Sayes Ganraj.
Did he speak at all?
Yes, he was very loud in telling Mr. Mingo that he was in breach of the Chief Justice order and that this needs to stop.
Did Mr. Mingo take on this other GCOM commissioner?
Yes, he did, and he just ignored him. Just said he just did not listen to what Mr. Ganraj said, and just proceeded to have the staff keep calling those numbers out.
Can you tell me anything about the figures which were being called by the GCOM employees?
As had happened on the fort, the numbers that were being called by GCOM were not the same numbers that were on the SOPs that the party agents had on their possession. And I was able to see that, particularly with Mr. Says Gunraj, who was turning around ever so often and showing observers that I was seated in front next to him, and he was showing everyone what was on the spreadsheet versus the numbers that they were calling.
So you have Mr. Mingo or maybe his staff, or Mingo himself?
The staff.
The staff are calling out numbers.
That's right.
Party agents have their SOPs.
Yes.
And they are able to establish immediately on hearing the called numbers that it was not corresponding
That is correct.
with the votes that were reflected on the SOPs. Was Mr. Mingo's attention called to this fact
Yes, it was.
by party agents?
Yes, it was.
And
He did nothing.
he said nothing,
He
did
said
nothing?
nothing, did nothing, but instructed the staff to keep calling those numbers out.
So despite what you may say is a complaint, he said continue.
That is correct.
Okay.
And during this process, did you see either the DCEO or the CEO?
I did not see the CEO, but the DCO was present in that room.
Sure, and did the DCO then address the complaints by the party agents?
No, she did not.
Did the DCO address the problem where the diplomats were told to get out of the country and so on?
No, she wasn't. She was in and out of the room, but at no point in time, whenever she was there, did she address any of those concerns.
Now, did you observe a pattern from
Yes.
the numbers which were being called out?
Yes, I did. Based on the SOPs that the parties had in front of them, and I was able to see, and based on what I was hearing, what was very clear that there was a pattern increase in the number of votes being read out for the APNU AFC and a decrease in the number of votes allocated to the PPP.
As an observer, did you get statements of polls from presiding officers of the?
I got a copy from the polling station that I was at, in addition to the photograph that I also took from the wall.
Yeah.
Now, you told us that after this day, or after the 13th of March, that AmCham had done its own tabulation and count using SOPs from all your observers,
That is
correct?
correct.
All right, so is it correct that at 10:18 that morning, a marshal of the court came into the room and served the returning officer with a document,
That is correct.
and the returning officer left?
He left but gave instructions to his GCOM staff to keep reading those numbers.
And did they, in his absence, sorry,
Just a quick question. You heard the RO instruct his staff to continue calling out the figures,
Yes, I did.
notwithstanding that he had to leave.
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
I want you to be clear, and if you can't recall, say so. When he gave this instruction to the staff to continue calling these numbers, was the DCO there?
She was not in the room at that point.
But you actually heard Mr. Mingo say, continue calling the numbers?
Yes, I did.
Did they comply with his instruction?
Yes, they did. And
What happened after that? What observations did you make?
so Mr. Mingo left for court, and the staff kept calling out the numbers from the document that they had in front of them. And after some time, the party agents again protested what was happening in the room and the continuous reading of the numbers, which were again at variance with what is on the SOP. And one by one, the party agents left the room. Most of them left the room, and the only ones that were in the room were the observers, myself included, and the GCOM staff kept reading those numbers despite the party agents not being in the room.
Now, you had referred to the fact that one of the observers was the Guyana Bar Association.
That is correct.
Was there any representative of the Guyana Bar Association who stayed back with you?
Correct. Now, we had Miss Pauline Chase. She was of the Guyana Bar Association, and she was in the room.
And did Miss Chase say anything?
Yes. So Miss Chase was trying to tell the GCOM staff that they were not adhering to the ruling of the Chief Justice, and she was verbally attacked by Miss Joseph.
When you say verbally attacked.
So Miss Joseph again got up and a very loud voice, threatening voice, and threatened Miss Chase. She insulted the observers in the room, saying that observers are, again, we're meddlers. We should not be doing the things that we're doing, and that we should keep quiet. And then she told while she's saying all of that, Miss Chase proceeded to explain. Miss Chase is saying, but I only want to point out that this is not in keeping with the Chief Justice ruling. And Miss Joseph responded by saying, "You don't know who I am. You better sit there. If you know what's good for you, I'll stamp you." Stamp, as in STMP. Stamp. I'm not sure what she meant, but she said, "I'll stamp you."
There's a word that's close to stamp. It's stomp.
But she said stamp, STAMP. That's what she said.
Guyanese have a way of broadening over, so
But she said the word stamp.
yeah.
So I suspect that she meant
Stamp.
stomping her.
So even though the other party agents had left, Miss Joseph stayed back. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
She was there.
Okay. At 1:15, the returning officer came back,
That is correct.
and then he told you all that the Chief Justice had given instructions that GCOM had to display the SOPs from which they were calling.
That is correct.
And what else did he then say?
And he said that they don't have equipment to facilitate that process in the room that we're currently in, and that the tabulation process will be suspended until 4 p.m. that afternoon, where we are to reconvene at the GCOM's headquarters for the continuation of the tabulation. And further, he said that when we get to the headquarters of GCOM, that he will continue the process at box 4792.
So up till this time, the tabulation process was still incomplete.
That is correct.
Did you go to GCOM's headquarters for 4 p.m.?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe to me what you saw when you got there?
So if entering Ashman's building earlier that morning was difficult and under heavy security, when we got to GCOM's headquarters, the security was even more intense, and they were heavier than earlier. I got into the GCOM headquarters and was directed to be under a shed where the tabulation was going to be held.
Was the returning officer there for 4 o'clock?
Yes, Mr. Mingo was present under the shed that was very poorly laid out for observers.
And was he the only person from GCOM there?
I saw him. Ms. Myers was in the background, but Mr. Mingo was in front of the head table, along with the same set of staff that he had earlier in the Ashman's building.
And were there observers there at the time?
Yes, they were. The same observers that were there earlier were present at the GCOM headquarters.
What about party agents? Were they there?
Yes, the same party agents that were there earlier were the ones that were present in the afternoon.
Did he resume the tabulation process?
Not immediately, because when he took his place at the head table, again, he was questioned on how this process was going to take place and at what point. And at that juncture, Mr. Mingo did not answer any question except to say, I am not answering any question. That was a phrase that he kept using all the time.
Was Miss Carol Joseph there?
Yes, she was there.
And what was she saying, if anything?
So Miss Joseph pretty much continued the same behavior that she had displayed at the Ashman's building. So she was extremely loud and intimidating, and then kept berating everyone that was seated there, that they were only asking questions ever so often, and told Mr. Mingo that he needs to proceed with this tabulation from where he left off.
Did Mr. Mingo comply?
Yes, he did.
So the tabulation began?
The tabulation commenced from what he said at Ashman at 4792, box 4792.
Sure. And were you numbers were called?
Numbers were called rapidly at the same pace that they were being called at the Ashman's building.
And were you able to see the projected figures?
I saw the projected figures, albeit it was faint, and there were some other things on that, the projected image that I observed as well.
What did you observe?
I observed that there were markings on those SOPs, and I'm saying SOPs with uncertainty because we were not allowed to see it, but they were images projected on the screen that appeared to look like SOPs. They were faint in colors, and what I saw that the SOPs, and I'm saying that again very cautiously, had markings on them, and I saw most definitively that the numbers for some of the SOPs for APNU was scratched with a higher number handwritten on it, and the numbers for the PPP were scratched with a lower number on it, and on some SOPs where there were zeros, for the APNU AFC, it was changed to an 8.
Were you able to see the increased or inflated numbers?
I knew there was increase based on what I said, but to recall them precisely, I cannot say. But what I did is I did make a record of the box, the SOP number that this was being observed for.
And while this was happening, were there police officers around?
There were lots of police officers heavily armed around.
Can you tell us where they were?
They were not directly under the shed, but they were around they were in the surrounding environment of that shed.
Did anyone attempt to go to the table where Mr. Mingo was?
Yes. The EU observer again attempted to see, validate those, to verify those SOPs that the GCOM staff alleged or claimed that they were using, but he was prevented from doing so.
By whom?
By Mr. Mingo and the GCOM staff.
And at 5:15, did the EU observer leave?
Correct. He left.
And was he followed by the Commonwealth observer?
That is correct.
When these two observers left, was the calling out of figures still happening?
Yes, it was.
Can you give us some detail about this international observer? Did you know who it was?
I remember him, I can identify him as seeing, but I cannot remember his name.
Nor which mission he was attached to?
The EU, there was the EU observer. Yes.
The EU representative.
Correct.
He said he was prevented from getting closer
That is correct.
by Mr. Mingo.
That is correct.
Well, I'd like to know what happened. Did Mr. Mingo stand
So-
up, put his arms out? Did he say anything to him?
So if I may just revert a little bit, when we were in the Ashman's building on the 12th, it was the same EU observer that asked if there was any way that we can see those SOPs to verify them, stating that that's just really what our mission is. And we have no stake in this entire process except to validate the document. And subsequently, they had written GCOM a letter asking to see those SOPs, but it never got an answer. And on the afternoon of the 13th, when we were all under the shed at the GCOM building, the EU observer referenced that letter and says, can we get an answer as to whether we'll be allowed to see those SOPs? And Mr. Mingo said that is for the CEO to answer, and he didn't give anything further. In light of that, the EU observer attempted to get closer to the table so he can see that document that they were calling those figures out, and he was told he needs to go back to his seat and don't come any further. Periodically, if anybody attempt to get closer, they would call the police to stand in the way and prevent anyone from getting closer to the table.
Did the party agents remain or did they walk out?
The party agents remained except for Mr. Jonathan Yearwood left and Mr. Sais Narayan left.
And was there an incident between Mr. Yearwood and Miss Joseph?
That is correct. When Mr. Yearwood left, and he told Mr. Mingo that if there was any major unrest in this country, he would be held responsible for it. And as he was proceeded out, Miss Carol Joseph taunted him and told him, "You just leave. No,
Okay.
you're not idiot."
So there was an
and there was an
altercation.
altercation
Sure.
between the two of them.
Okay, but did you remain?
Yes, I did.
And at 6 p.m., had the sub-district of East Coast Demerara been concluded?
Yes, it had.
And had East Bank Demerara been concluded?
Correct. So the East Bank Demerara was concluded at Ashman's building on that morning, just before the Chief Justice had ruled, and they had just started East Coast. So it was a continuation when he mentioned box 4792. That was a continuation from the East Coast of Demerara's tabulation.
Now, you had told us that when the process was supposed to have started back at Ashman's building earlier that day, that you had observed a pattern of increasing votes or increasing numbers for the APNU AFC and decreasing numbers for the PPPC. Was this still the case?
That is correct. It was still the case. I observed the same pattern for various polling stations on the east coast of Demerara. However, from all analysis and observation, it was far more pronounced for the East Bank Demerara than it was for the East Coast Demerara.
And did the OAS that afternoon issue a press statement?
Yes, they did.
And did they withdraw from Guyana?
That is correct. They said because of the continuous attempts at frustrating the process and the lack of credibility in the tabulation process, they could not continue this any longer and they were withdrawing from Guyana.
At 10:41 was the East Coast Demerara count concluded.
That is correct.
And when it was finished, what happened?
When it was finished, Mr. Mingo had prepared a statement which he read the results similar to what he did on the 5th on the balcony and declared the results showing that the APNU had won the elections for District 4. He signed it in front of everyone and Ms. Carol Joseph also signed it as the only witness.
And who did he declare to be the winner? Sorry, Commissioner.
Ms. Carol Joseph, is this the same person you told us was an authorized APNU AFC party agent?
That is correct.
And she signed the declaration
That is correct.
as a witness?
That is correct.
Were other party agents invited to or permitted to sign the declaration?
Mr. Mingo asked if anybody else is coming and no one got up.
So they were invited?
They were invited to sign it.
So you say that that Mr. Mingo made a declaration of the results. Who did he declare to be the winner?
He did not say specifically that the APNU won it, but by virtue of him calling those numbers out, you were able to tell based on the majority of votes cast who the winner was for District 4.
Was the winner.
It was the APNU AFC.
Now you have set out in your statement from paragraph 104 to 109 what AmCham's findings were.
That is correct.
Would you like to see those paragraphs again, or are you familiar with them?
I'm familiar with them.
And those findings were made after conducting the process which you had described to us at the start of the testimony, of your testimony.
That is correct.
Apart from your observations and your findings, do you know whether any other observer groups did reports?
Yes, all of the observer group did reports. The EU, the OAS, the Commonwealth, CARICOM, they all did their reports for submission.
And have you seen the OAS and EU reports?
I've seen those reports. And if I may just quickly add, after this process had ended, AmCham did an independent comparative analysis of the results. I had on my possession actual records as they were being read of the numbers being called by GCOM. So those are authentic recordings that I have that were not altered. And I also, AmCham also had copies of the SOPs that we independently retrieved, not from the political parties, including the ones that we had. And we did about 100, we did an analysis of about 170 plus SOPs and found that 84 of them were not in compliance. GCOM's numbers were at variance with 84 of those SOPs, basically, and that's how we were able to conclude that the results were not credible.
And sorry.
At several places in your statement, you say you have photographs or video recordings of a number of occurrences.
That is correct.
Are those available to the commission?
Yes, they are available to the commission.
Yes, now you said 84 contained variances when you were doing your independent checks. Were these variances consistent one way or were they mixed up? Can you tell me a little more about the
yes.
variances?
So the 84 SOPs that we found to be, the 84 ballot boxes that we found to be at odds with the SOPs were predominantly from the East Bank and the East Coast, not from South, North, or North Georgetown, so just those two sub-districts.
Yes.
And the pattern was in all of those cases, the numbers of votes allocated to the AP and the AFC were increased. And in all of those cases, the number of votes for the PPP were decreased.
So what you are saying is that the variances were between the actual figures you were seeing on these 84 SOPs and what had been given by GCOM as being the numbers for those sub-districts?
Correct.
Commissioners, we do have some audio-visual material which we would like to have shown. It is all together, and after it is shown, I may have to ask, or I may ask the experts to pause it at the end of each one so the witness can describe what is in it. May I have your leave to do that? So, ma'am, certain things are going to come up on the screen. I'll ask you to have a look and then you can indicate to me what it is you see, if you are able to identify. Okay, so can you tell us what that is?
Yes, that is the statement of poll for the polling station at Monterey Primary School that I observed. And if you notice there at the bottom would be the name for Onika Reese, and she did not sign it, like I said.
Okay.
And you would notice as well that the numbers for the PPP was 261, and the numbers for the APNU AFC was 7.
Okay.
Right, so that is one of the SOPs that I use in my studies as well.
Thank you. I'm asking that this photograph be admitted as RR1.
Yes, we are admitted.
You have an RR1 already?
Yes. The statement is.
Oh yes, I beg your pardon.
RR.
What am I saying? Yes. Alright. Yes, I know. Yes, can we move on?
Yes, please.
Can we move on to the next image, please? Right. Are you able to say anything about that photograph?
Yes, so this photograph just basically showed that the DROs had provided the package that contained documents for the RO's office. You would see it says RO package at the top. So we had copies that they were submitting that to Mr. Mingo.
So the persons in white shirts are DROs.
Those, I'm not sure if they're DRs, but those are GCOM staff, for sure.
I'm asking that photograph be admitted as RR3.
Yes, our.
What does this image say? Can you see it?
Yes, I can. Now, that is a snapshot of the Excel sheet that AmCham was using for us to tabulate. So when we hear GCOM calling their numbers out, we would enter it into each column that represents a party that's going across from left to right. You will see at the top it says ANOD, AP, AFC, CG, LJP, PPP, PRP, TCI, TNM. And so as they're calling, the box numbers are also stated to your extreme left. That is his division number, and it also has the name of the polling place, including the number of electors for that particular polling station. So
I see. So AmCham was keeping a record
That
of
is
the
correct.
ballot box numbers.
Correct. We already had this set for our use. So as they were saying, for example, box number 4001, we already had 4001 ready there, and as they're calling out, let's say 10 for APNU AFC, 3 for PPP, we would enter that into the vacant columns.
And this forms part of the records that you
That is
looked
correct.
at and coming to your
That is
opinion.
correct. So this actually captures GCOM's numbers that they were calling.
Sure. Chairman has a question for you.
Use the expression.
Yes.
Who is-
AmCham. That's
Who is doing?
yeah. I was doing that,
You
and
were
my
doing it.
correct. I was doing that, and my colleague next to me, we were taking turns doing that. When
Right.
two persons were allowed.
Yes. Might this be admitted as RR4? Could we go on to the next image? Could that be enlarged a bit?
So you would notice it says there,
That's too big. Could we scroll down? Yes. What is that at the top?
it says number of boxes not counted, 59. So on the 4th of March, when there was this controversy as to the number of ballots that were not counted for North and South Georgetown, AmCham was able to provide this list of ballot boxes that were not, or SOPs that were not counted. I took a photograph of this and I submitted this actual list to Ms. Myers.
Is that your handwriting?
Yes.
Might this be admitted as RR5? Next image, please. And is it possible to enlarge this at all?
So this is an image that I took of the court martial attempting to serve the injunction on the 5th of March to various persons at GCOM, including the chairwoman and a few others, but they were not allowed. Some of them were not allowed, and at the very top, it's the court martial waiting there, could not find the persons that he wanted to serve the injunction.
Is that the person with a document in his hand?
That's the third person from your right in the white shirt.
Oh, I see. Next to the police officer.
That is correct.
So these police officers were standing at the bottom of those stairs?
And at the top, and they were preventing him initially from going to the top and serving the injunction.
Thank you. Might this be admitted as RR6?
Yes.
So can we go to the next image?
So this is our sort of like a bit of a foundational information that we were using that showed the number of polling stations for each of the sub-district for District 4, as well as the number of electors for Sub-District 4.
Thank you. Might this be marked RR7?
Yes.
Can we move to the next image? Where is this? Can you
So
tell us?
this is on the morning of the 5th of March, when Mr. Levens, which is on your left-hand side, and that is his colleague, another GCOM staff, those were the two persons that were the replacement staff when the two women could not go further. That's Mr. Levin there, and they're about to, and that's the projector that you're looking at, where this guy on the right was the one who was entering the data as it was being called.
Okay, could we just make it a bit smaller? And what, are you able to say what is in front of Mr. Levan?
That's a laptop,
This is your photograph?
yes.
Sorry, may I just have 1 minute? Do you know which part of Ashman's, where was this in Ashman's building?
This is a tabulation room in Ashman's where it was held from the night of the 2nd of March up until the 5th.
Sure. Can we move to the next image, please?
So what you're looking at there is Mr. Levins in the process of calling out the numbers when he was given the opportunity to do that. And what you're looking at there is when he started to put his hands on his head and claim that he was tired and so forth. So this is actually taken when he was calling those numbers. If you look carefully, if you expand the photographs, you're going to see the SOPs that are actually in front of him. His hand is resting on it, and he had more in front of him. So you can go a little bigger, and you'll see the stack of
Wait,
SOPs.
just to say that those were the SOP.
Those are the SOPs, yes.
You saw them?
Yes, I did.
This is your photograph.
This is my photograph.
Might this be RR9?
Yes.
Next image, please.
So this is on the night of the 4th of March when the 2 female GCOM staff said that they were tired and nobody knew what next. So there you can see, as I said, you had Mr. Lowenfield who's in the center. That's Mr. Levins there on my right, and that's Ms. Myers that's standing there. They were on their mobiles and they're not really telling us what's next. And this is, if you look, there are some garbage bags at the bottom. Those are where envelopes were secured in.
RR10.
Yes.
And this would be on the 4th of March, just maybe after 10 when Mr. Mingo supposedly fell ill. And you're looking at Mr. Hetzberger, who was Mr. Lowenfield's executive assistant, or personal assistant, I think it was. He's in the white t-shirt, and that is Mr. Colin April in the total white attire that's patching him down. Yeah, he's
Back to us.
back to the camera, yes.
Might this be RR11?
Yes.
Next image, please.
So this is an interesting photograph. This photograph was taken of the very last tabulation that was done using SOPs on the morning of the 5th of March. After this, using SOPs, no one knows and can validate what happened next. So if there was any information or evidence that you need to, by which to measure what happened and what the running totals are, this would be the photograph that actually proved it. So, yes, so what happened is after everything just went chaotic, what I did was to snap that screenshot so we know what was projected on the screen at that point. So this is the very last evidence of tabulation that was done before everything went downhill.
Might this be admitted as RR12?
So what
What do we see here?
What you have here is, and this was a photograph that my colleague on the outside took to send after we heard, I heard in the room, because I was in the room, that Ms. Myers had given instruction for the door to be locked. So we told them to see if they can get a photograph and send it to me. This was a photograph that was taken of when they locked the door and the police was guarding the door so no one can go into the tabulation room.
So this was a photograph which you received from a colleague.
After we asked him to take it out.
Was this
first.
an AmCham colleague?
Correct.
This would have been what day?
This is on this would be on the 4th of March. Yes.
Might this be marked RR13?
Yes.
Can we move forward? Yes, I think this one has some audio.
That has to be. The Commission has, as I promised, listened and deliberated, and they have. That has to be.
and he did the random sampling and saw that the spreadsheet was not correspondent to the SOP. The voice note that you're about to hear is what I recorded of him saying that they're going to use the SOPs. Continue on.
The Commission has, as I promised, listened and deliberated, and they have agreed that we will continue the process here with all those who are designated to be here to use statement v statement. So that is what we'll do for the remainder of the 300 and whatever statements we have uncounted for Region 4. So I think the staff will prepare the statements. So we'll go statements by statement, starting, I take it from 411, 111, A, right down until finish. He's back. By now I take it the issues of whether we have 67 statements for Joshua not counted.
Sorry? Venue, so we have to try to resolve that. So can we move on with the pictures that we have, please?
So this is a photograph that I took when I was waiting to be let into the tabulation room on the 12th of March, after the observers were told that we had to get new accreditation, and I was allowed into the building. Whilst I was waiting, I took a snapshot of the tabulation room. You would have seen that it's rearranged, it's clean, it's rearranged, and there's just chairs there, and the head table is where the white tablecloth is on to your extreme right.
So that room, can you go back?
Yes, could you go back to the photograph, please?
That room was tabulated.
Correct.
And that was the room that Ms. Myers said that GCOM staff felt threatened.
That is correct.
Might this be admitted as RR14? Next photograph, please.
So
Can you tell us what this is?
that's one of the staff that was reading at the GCOM headquarters on the 13th of March.
Do you know her name?
I'm not sure if she's February or Denny's Bad. But it's one of those two persons. I'm not sure which one is she.
Sure. I'm sorry, RR15, might that have been marked RR15? Yes, what's this?
So that is a photograph that was taken of the police as they were about to get closer when Mr. Mingo was about to make his second declaration.